Hi everyone. So today what we are going to do is learn a little bit more about something called speciation, or how we get new species. And as an aside, I just want to remind you all that today, April 22nd, and really April 22nd every year, is Earth Day. Really every day should be Earth Day, but the idea is that it's a purposeful day that we celebrate the Earth. So try to think of something that you could do today in order to help make the Earth a better place, whether it is, picking up some garbage or using less energy, something today that will help sustain us all on this beautiful planet that we're living on. But in terms of what we're going to be doing during class, the opening 5 minutes is going to be dedicated towards that wildlife journal. So hopefully you picked which animal you would like to watch. Again, if you click on the link that I sent, there are tons of different options. I'm going to default in class to the eagles, but again, you can scroll across the top and really find a whole bunch of options that you might want to choose. So we're going to dedicate the first 5 minutes of class to adding to the wildlife journal. Remember, that is in the back of your biology journal, and we're just going to record that information every class period. If you're unsure about what to write in your wildlife journal, again, I introduced this on Monday, so there is a small presentation that you could click on that has like the specific directions and what to include. But you should be following along with what we wrote on Monday to use as a guide. So we're going to open class with that. Then we're going to do entry 24. The first day, we're going to actually spend several days on speciation. And so the idea is, depending on how far we get today, we're not going to actually have any homework until the end of class on Monday next week. Then we're going to, hopefully at the end, have enough time to do at least one more of those getting to know you activities that we did in class on Monday as well. Okay, so I'm going to jump in and click on the speciation presentation. If you would like to do the same or follow along. You will need your biology journals. We're going to do entry 24 or start it today. And our essential question is, how does speciation occur? Or put another way, how do we get new species? Where do they come from? So take a moment and write down the essential question for today on your journals. And then when you're ready to proceed, go ahead and hit play. So in class, I want to start off with kind of a question and answer, which should be interesting with some people at home, some people in person, and everything. But the idea is, what is a species? How do we define it? So for example, I have a bunch of dogs and I have a bunch of fish. How do I know what a species is? And so if you're missing class and watching this later, we're going to kind of do an activity where I have a photo of a bunch of dogs and I'm posing the question, how many species do you think are in this picture? If you click on the Jamboard link on the right, it pops up that specific thing. Let's see. And if I copy, let's see if it works right now, in the middle of doing the video. I want you to figure out or post how many species of dogs do you think you see in the picture, and what are your reasons for grouping them in that way. So I'm going to have everybody, similar to the getting to know you, just add a post-it with their thoughts. You don't have to put your name on it, but just a post-it with your thoughts somewhere around the photo. And then if you click on the right arrow, there's actually 2 slides, because the next question is, how many species do you think are in this picture? And I will paste it on the Jamboard as well, so that way you guys can see it. And I think I can't get rid of the bottom of the picture, but that's okay. So you're going to do the same thing. Get a post-it note, write how many species do you think there are, and what are your reasons for grouping them in the way that you did. long story short, we're going to spend some time in class doing that. So if you didn't have a chance to watch this during class, then maybe go to the Jamboard and see the post-its that people left if you're watching this later, or you can always add in your own too. But then once we kind of get past that, then it leads us to the idea of what is a species? How do scientists define it? And this is where the note part comes in. Underneath your essential question, I want you to write out what the definition of a species is. So 2 creatures are considered different species if they cannot interbreed, which means have babies, under natural conditions. And I put a little star underneath. Natural conditions means that they, would find each other in nature normally and have babies. We can do some kind of crazy stuff in zoos and artificial conditions, but out there in the wild, would they meet and breed under natural conditions? If they can, then they are the same species, and if they cannot, then they are typically different species. You don't have to include this on the slide, but some examples of unnatural conditions would be ligers, meaning a lion and a tiger together, or a mule, which is a horse and a donkey put together. Both of those instances are examples of animals that cannot have their own babies. So we can talk about the ability to pass on genetic material, but kind of the definition of a species also is that the babies can have babies and in their unnatural conditions, meaning normally speaking, a lion and a tiger would never get together. So if I tie this back to the dogs and the fish, you don't have to write this down, but I did want to circle back. Dogs are considered all members of the same species. Any dog breed can have babies with another dog breed, though it might be a little strange. And maybe they wouldn't naturally do, interbreed with one another, a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. But technically they can have babies and their babies can have babies. Whereas the cichlids that were in the picture, those were actually cichlids of Lake Victoria, a very popular scientifically studied lake in Africa where new species kind of came in and were invasive and changed the entire makeup of the ecosystem. They are actually all different species. And even if I go back to the picture here, they all kind of look similar-ish, but they have different distinctness in their color and their structure. And here you can kind of see what the color photos look like. Their feeding habits. So even though they might look a lot alike to us, they are actually quite aware of each other. And they know which fish they will and won't breed with and which ones are members of the same species. So again, to our naked eye, they might look really similar, but to them, they are strikingly contrasted in the color, structure, feeding habits, and more. So for example, the one on the top left would never mate with the one on the top right. Again, you didn't have to write this down. I just wanted to make sure to kind of tie it back to the idea that dogs for now are all members of the same species. If someday, Chihuahuas and Great Danes maybe couldn't have babies with one another, then they might diverge into different species. But for now, they're all just different versions or breeds of the same species. I do have a really awesome recap video here. It's on speciation exactly, and it talks at the end about ligers too. But it gives an idea of how speciation occurs. It does go into a little bit more detail than we plan to do in class. It talks about different events and ways that it can happen, but it's just good general information. So I would encourage you, if you're watching this outside of class, to hop over to the presentation and watch it. Otherwise, you can YouTube Crash Course Speciation and find it just as easy. Underneath where you put your tree diagram, or excuse me, underneath where you wrote out what a species is, I do want you to draw a picture of this tree diagram. So we drew a similar evolutionary tree in our last journal entry before break. And here I want you to kind of, it's just tipped up instead of on its side, but I want you to be able to know where speciation occurs. And that is happening at the branching points of these trees. So anywhere you see a line and then it splits into two different lines, at that point, the singular species that led up to it, the common ancestor, right, of those species became different enough within that population to become two different species. And from then on, they kind of took different evolutionary paths. So one, for example, here ended up becoming species C, and another ended up being the precursor to species A and B. And then at a certain point, they became different enough to become species A and species B. So anytime you see a branch point, that signifies speciation. And again, those points exactly where that branching occurs, that speciation event, signifies kind of that last common ancestor before that branching took place. So we will see exactly how far we get in class. I might progress onto a little bit of day 2's material to learn a little bit more about speciation, but I will attach a second video if we get to that case. If we don't make it, then there isn't any additional homework. Thank you all for listening.